Welcome to this preview of Rule the Waves 3. My name's Dickie, and I've been playing Rule the Waves 2 for several years, producing a range of guides and how-to videos, as well as extended playthroughs. And now I am super excited to see that we are about to get our hands on Rule the Waves 3 imminently. I've been lucky enough to be given a press copy, and I thought I would take you through the simple fundamentals and some of the basic choices of this great game and try and persuade you to give it a go, because I think it's absolutely great. If you're already familiar with Rule the Waves 1 or 2, you'll be fine. Just dive in, you'll enjoy yourself. You know a large percentage. Rule the Waves 3 is not a change from Rule the Waves 2, it's an expansion on either side. It goes earlier in time and later in time and introduces a number of interesting concepts, as well as doing a lot of deep work into the game's mechanics. But if you've never experienced it, then I think you will find one of the most immersive, most fascinating, and certainly the most detailed naval simulations that are around. Now, yes, it does ever so slightly look like a Microsoft Access database that you're playing with from, say, circa 1995. And that does not matter. It turns out that where you put your coding effort does matter. Do you put your effort into making lovely little waves on a flowing sea and nice little splashy explosions? Do you put it into a breadth and depth of naval technology and the interrelation of naval systems to give you an opportunity to explore what it would be like to be First Sea Lord of the Admiralty, or Chief of Naval Operations, or Gross Admiral of the Kriegsmarine, and other things in Russian and Italian and Chinese and Spanish and Japanese that I can't pronounce easily off the top of my head. Your focus is on crafting a navy according to your insights, your whims, your experimental enthusiasm, and then seeing that set out in battle with really sophisticated opponents. Let's have a little explore. I do have some test games which I may share shortly, but let's go first of all and choose a new game. And you can see that you've got 4 choices of where to start, and they each really create quite a different gaming experience because the technology had been so strongly developed in this time. And I think that's amazing. I mean, we're actually only talking about 80 years, 1890 when the game starts to 1970 when the game ends. 80 years. And yet in that time, naval technology changed again and changed again on top of that so many times. And with each change, you get different styles of naval warfare and different challenges to overcome. You could well, if you're a complete newbie to the game, start in 1890, and you will get the end of the ironclad era, just moving into the beginning of the pre-dreadnoughts. And you just get battleships and you get cruisers, and it's nice and simple. The armor strength at this period relative to the penetrative power of guns was very strong. The range was very short. So when it comes to battle, they're a little bit like slugfests, hammering it against each other until one or other side cracks. Really simple. Yes, there are torpedoes, but they're very short range, and they do tend to get used primarily for finishing off an already crippled opponent. Move forward barely 10 years, and we are in the full autumn of the pre-dreadnought era, with dreadnoughts just a few years away, and a huge revolution in naval affairs that's going to happen then. The 1900 start gives you something that none of the others do. All the other starts give you a legacy fleet, and often an interesting rag bag of different ships and styles that they are, and you have to, as one of your tasks, sort them out and create a cohesive naval force and a cohesive naval strategy from them. But in the 1900 start, you have the opportunity to manually build your own fleet. I wouldn't advise that if you're just starting out, but once you got your feet under the table with this game, it's a really fascinating project to do. Move forward 20 years to 1920, and you are now coming to the start of the end of the gun warfare era and the very beginning of the aircraft and carrier era. This is very much the dawn of the carrier. And moving to 1935, 15 years after that, and you are now flipping to the point where gunnery and carriers are about equal, and the carriers over the next few years are going to predominate in good weather. Guns are still going to predominate in bad weather or in nighttime, any time when visibility is restricted. And this start will be the final one, taking you up to the 1970 end. So very different navies that you get from each of one of these experiences. I'm going to click on the 1890 because I think for the beginner, this is easily the place to start. And here are the nations that you have to play with: the Royal Navy, the Kriegsmarine, the Russian Imperial Navy, the Austro-Hungarian Imperial Navy, the Italian Navy, the French Marine Nationale, the Spanish Navy, the Imperial Japanese, the American, of course, and the Qin Chinese Navy. I would advise when you are picking one of these to pick a middling one. Don't go with the bosses. Don't go with the Royal Navy or later the United States Navy. The United States Navy in 1890 certainly isn't a boss, but by the time you get to, say, 1920, it certainly is, and 1935. So avoid the big boys. Equally, avoid the tiny navies. So the Chinese and the Spanish are really for hardcore practitioners who don't mind starting with massive disadvantage. I would also avoid going with what I'm going to call the dead-end navies, the cul-de-sac navies, who are geographically disadvantaged by either being stuck up the end of a sea that has multiple choke points. I'm looking at you, Russia, and of course Austro-Hungary, and I'm looking at you, Japan, primarily because you're round the other end of the earth from all the other rivals, and it can be a bit hard to find good opponents. So for me, this leaves the choice of Germany, Italy, and France as really interesting middling navies to start off with. And any one of those will give you an interesting challenge. The Germans will give you a little bit of an empire that you could expand if you fight some successful wars, or you could not. You could decide to just stay within home waters. Having an empire gives you extra economic resources, but also gives you extra naval responsibilities. So it's a little bit of a two-edged sword there. The French certainly have a quite large, the second largest imperial possessions, and they have to be guarded, as well as its own kind of two-front nature, because it can fight the Germans in the North Sea and the Italians down in the Mediterranean, and indeed the Austro-Hungarians, or the Russians for that matter. And the Italians are stuck in the Mediterranean. And being stuck can be good because you can tailor your ships specifically for that environment. So short range, low freeboard, because the Mediterranean is relatively unstormy, relatively. And so you can make pugnacious short range ships that can be very well protected but aren't expected to go further onto the high seas. So the opportunity for a much more tailored navy there. So those are your choices. I'm going to pick the French because I have a bit of a soft spot for the Marine Nationale. This is here because there used to be some extra countries there, but they're no longer there. You get a little bit of a description of the French. So French has a mid-sized navy with a decent economy. It has melony colonies and needs to plan conflict for both the Mediterranean and on the high seas. It's a liberal democracy, and liberal democracies give you certain benefits in terms of technical innovation and in stability. Its build area is Northern Europe, so this area. You have a reasonable budget. You have an inconsistent naval policy. So, yes, you are, in France's case, you are the Minister of Marine, but you are not immune from political influences, and there will be sudden rushes of blood to the head when a president suddenly says, we must have 12 new cruisers or something like that, just to make life interesting for you. You do get some bonuses around quadruple turrets and hardened armor-piercing penetrators, which is not many. Other countries get more. If I click on the Germans, for example, you can see they have a whole host of technologies, but they do start from quite a low base. You'll see their dock size is only 12,000, the French are 14,000. The French budget is nearly 24,000. The German budget is only 16. So each country worthy of a little bit of examination before you decide who you want to play. You can enter a name if you wish, and a fleet size. It goes from very small to super large. They really are very, very different. The very small is, as it says on the tin, very small. And for your first little practice run, yeah, go with very, very small. Later on, when you want to really expand your ship design and shipbuilding chops, yes, by all means, go for super large. The research rate. So, as I said, the 80 years of this game covers an outstanding, huge number of technical innovations, and you can slow that down. And some people have played, I've seen very enjoyable games where they just want, the pre-Dreadnought era to just, have an expanded thing. Because what can happen quite frequently is that by the time you have designed and built, say, a battleship, which takes about 3 years usually, it's already becoming obsolescent. Already, there are weight savings that could have allowed you to get more equipment in. There may be improvements to fire control that will allow it to shoot more accurately. There may be changes in layout that allow for a more streamlined and efficient ship design for you. Engine machinery improvements may have allowed you to make it faster. You cannot kind of just fold your arms and go, well, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait until some decent technologies come along, because they come along so fast. But if you change the research rate, you can just calm that down a little bit. Tech variation, you can decide to have none, which means that technologies come when they were meant to come. Slight, the technologies come a year or two early or a year or two late or somewhere in between, and then considerable. They come over a bit of a scatter, and some potentially might not come at all, I believe. Harsh peace deals. There was, in early versions of Rule the Waves, there was a lot of huffing and puffing that, you'd win these fabulous naval victories, and then the politicians would all go off and go, well, let's just call it a draw, and, well, nothing will change. So playing harsher peace deals makes sure that you get something for your war investment. AI advantage, something I don't personally play with, but if you find that you're beating the AI too much, you can give it an advantage, and that will slip the AI an extra 10% budget. Slow aircraft developments are a little bit like slowing the research rate. You may go, do you know what? I'm just comfortable with Dreadnought gunnery and not want to get into the whole new dimension of aircraft. I've played a long campaign with France from 1920, from the birth of aviation, and I can tell you it's a fascinating struggle, changing your tactics all over the place, but it's an extra whole series of things to learn. So yeah, if you want to just keep with gunnery for a while, then tick that one. And equally, if you want to lessen the impact of aircraft, you can reduce the size of air bases down to 60 instead of their maximum of 120. And the default is 100. So those are some of the options that you'll classically get. I'm going to give you a small navy. I'm going to click a game. You get up to 9 games to play. As you can see, I've been playing with a couple ones. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to generate a fleet for me. As I said, if you start in 1900, you can design your own fleet, but I wouldn't recommend that for you as a beginner. And here you have a nice little small fleet. If you've never seen this before, it's a little bit overwhelming, but actually once you've orientated yourself, it's pretty straightforward. I will be producing a detailed guide going through the whole lot, but for now, let me just take you. Across the top are a series of tabs, and these describe to you the forces that you have to hand, the ships you've got under construction, the submarines, the coastal forces. It describes the colonies that you have with a map and your various areas, provinces, colonies, and the bases, the ports within them. It also lists all of your officers. In this middle bit, you've got your ships. Down here, you've got details around your whole navy and what is controlling that, primarily the money. Over here, you have some of the principal controls of what you're going to do. And over here is your politics, all the other countries that you are facing and what the state of relationships is between them. So against the Russians here, we seem to be pretty good. Tension level is only 1. Whereas over here with Germany, our tension level is already 4, and we haven't even done anything. Some of these controls are much more important than others. Down here, the words monthly balance, which is currently set at 2,369. That's really important. It's really important that that stays in the black and doesn't go into the red. And if it isn't the red, that you've got funds, your savings, that are enough to cover it for a while. And often you'll build up those funds at a quite a high level and then go into a bit of debt financing in negative monthly balance whilst you undertake a major shipping construction project, for example. Anyhow, more of that later. Let's focus on the ships. So we have 4 Marengo class battleships: the Marengo, the Ocean, the Friedland, and the Richelieu. Let's open up them. And here we are, the Marengo. It's the Marengo class. It was built in 1890, so very contemporary. It displaces 11,100 tons and goes at a relatively fast, for this period, 18 knots. 16 would be probably more typical, and I've seen 14. You have Captain Lohm as the commander, and his abilities at the moment are a big fat question mark. We don't know if he's above average or below average. We don't know if he has a special ability or not. He is a little bit of a mystery. The Marengos are armed with 2 12-inch guns, fore and aft, 2 10-inch guns on the side, and 4 5-inch guns to either side. I have to say, that's not the most brilliant of arrangements, but there you go. I would have preferred to have seen some 6 or 7-inch guns, and I would have preferred to have seen more of them. But we have what we have, which is part of the fun. It's part of the reason for going, right, well, first thing I'm going to do is design myself a whole new class of ironclad and see if I can't come up with something better. We do have 2 submerged torpedo tubes. The fire control is local only, which is the very minimum fire control. Basically, you're looking over the sights of the guns and pointing them. We have 11-inch belt amidships, 2.5-inch deck, 11-inch on the turrets, 5 inches on the secondaries, and a 10-inch CT conning tower. And then finally, which is a reasonable level of protection for this era. It's not breathtaking, but it's not awful. And up here we have a ship history that will describe to you when it was laid down, when the captain took over, all the various refits, the battle honours, all sorts of details coming forward. You will get quite attached to some of your ships that do some outstanding service, particularly those that continue to serve well past the usual expectation for a ship of that kind, or it's gone through a number of conversions and had an entirely new lease of life. So that's all good fun. We then have Gideon, Montcalm, and Deputy Thros. I think I said that wrong. And if we open up their design, this is the detailed design view. Let me just hide that for a moment. This is the simple view. Let's go with the simple view just for a moment. So the Gideons, so 7,600, 21 knots. Again, a reasonable speed for this period. Again, Bulgar, the captain, we don't know of their abilities. We don't know any of the officers' abilities. We've just started. 6 8-inch guns. Oh, okay, that's not too bad. With a broadside of 5, 2 fore, 2 aft, and 1 either side. 12 5-inch guns, 10 2-inch guns. Pretty soon, the 2-inch guns will become irrelevant, and they will be removed, and you won't build any 2-inch guns. Modest armor, which is 4 inches thick in the main, and again, simple fire control. No torpedoes on this. The Safax class of light cruisers, so they get the American abbreviation letters used in the game, developed in, I think, 1920 or something, or revised in 1920. CL for light cruiser. Actually, these are protected cruisers, and meaning they have a different armor scheme to the light cruisers to come. So whereas the armored cruisers have 4-inch belts, here they only have 2-inch belts. 10 6-inch guns, 8 2-inch guns, and a couple of torpedo tubes. And 22 knots, which is as fast as you're going to get in 1890. Cracking speed. And the junior admiral here, Darlan, again of no known ability. Now, you also finally have a couple of KEs, corvettes. One of these is a colonial corvette. The little C behind the speed here, 15 knots C, indicates that it's colonial. It's got some extra habitation and cooling for it to operate for extended periods in hot climates without the crew getting very upset. And this little one is only 900 tons, and classically this is used either as a minesweeper, you can fit it out as a minesweeper, or as an anti-submarine ship. There are no submarines at the moment, so I'm not entirely sure what use this is, but as a model going forward, it will help. Let's go back and have a look at that daunting design screen. I'm not going to take you through this in detail, because there is so much to it, but that's the point of the game. I'm going to do a playthrough where I take you through this at a much gentler pace, so you don't have to get overwhelmed. But there are the ability to control every imaginable type of naval technology on a ship that you could possibly want. Here are details of the armor scheme. Here are details of the displacement, the speed, the engine types, the range of the ship, what kind of torpedo, if any's been invented, hasn't been invented in 1870, the kind of accommodation you want, whether this is going to be fitted out for colonial service, your main armament, your secondary armament, your tertiary armament. Over here, whether you have torpedoes, whether you fit minesweeping gear, what kind of anti-submarine equipment you're going to have, how many radar are you going to fit a long time in the future? Are you going to be able to fit seaplanes or later on helicopters, and what kind of capacity, and you're going to give them some catapults so that the ship doesn't have to stop in order to put the plane into the water and so that it can go launch itself. Later on, you're going to have missiles, as in the 1950s and so on. There's a whole set of controls here to help you change this graphic, which I'm certainly not going to explain. And all together, they give you the most remarkable ability to conceive and design your ships your way to fulfill what your goals are. If we go and have a look at the map, the map is divided into a whole set of sea zones. And if I just zoom in a little bit on Europe, which is for obvious reasons the very busiest sea zone, you can see the flags represent the various areas where you are. So as the French, we are in northern waters, Northern Europe, and we're down in the Mediterranean. This little symbol here is that there is some coastal batteries protecting both of those. And indeed, you can see our potential opponents also have some coastal batteries. When you have a little think about what you want to do in this area, oh, by the way, you can see some of these are grayed out. Nobody has these at the moment. They're available for seizing, or in Norway and Iceland. One of the things you've got to do is decide, what am I going to design? Because the design of your ships is fundamentally the naval strategy that you're going to fight. What do I mean by that? Well, you may decide to emphasize quality, a small number of super technologically sophisticated, for now, ships versus a large number of all right, middling kind of ships. And that's a perfectly legitimate choice to make. You may want to emphasize big ships, battleships, carriers, maybe heavy cruisers over the little ships, the destroyers and what have you, or vice versa. And go through a je ne colle kind of strategy, which was developed by the French slightly before this period, and featured lots of tiny little torpedo boats, which they felt would be an equalizer in being able to destroy the British battleships. It was a strategy repeated later on when guided missile motorboats were used to try and sink bigger ships in the 1970s, in the Arab-Israeli wars, for example. You can think about how you're going to invest in ships versus submarines once they come along, versus air power once that comes along. And you will need to think about blockade and invasion. So some nations are more blockadable than others. So the nations that are stuck up at the end of a sea with multiple choke points, like the Russians and the Aust-Hungarians, are very blockadable. Others, like Britain, are much less blockadable, and you will need to shape your fleet accordingly. If you can blockade your enemy, you will impact their unrest. Unrest is down here. There's an unrest level. You can see France starts with an unrest level of 2. That would be definitely something I would want to sort out and have some calm and let that go down to 0. If you get to an unrest level of 9, you have a revolution, which can be exciting. And if it goes to 9 during a war, well, then your enemy will give up, or you will, if you're blockaded. The other thing to have a think about is invasion. I'm just going to hit this red one here, and you get these lots and lots of little arrows. So if I just zoom in a little bit, you can see here that I have, let's go from Tunisia, which is French. So I have this circle coming out from Tunis, and I could invade either Sardinia or Sicily, or indeed Malta from there. And invasions can take place so long as you are the stronger fleet in a sea area, and that also can help tilt the tide of victory in a battle. So, two things to consider. And that sort of is the game. You have your ships. You go and design a completely new one. Here I've asked for a completely fresh ship. I will go and ask for a pre-dreadnought. I'm going to use this little computer symbol, which is, please auto-design one for me. Okay, there's one. And then I can go, well, that's rubbish. I don't like that at all. Design another one. Or I can go, well, okay, I can see that's, got some promise. I'm just going to tweak this. You design your ships, and then having designed them, you go and build them. And having built them, you go and fight them. And having fought them, you win wars. And rinse and repeat through the course of the most remarkable transition in naval warfare that the world had ever seen. I cannot commend to you this game highly enough. It has absorbed me. I have had moments of terror, moments of elation. I've had some marvelous victories. I've got some defeats that I've swept under the carpet. We won't discuss those anymore. I've learnt so much, and I'm, quite a keen naval enthusiast naturally. And I will be producing a series of videos that will take you through the game and explain how all of these various mechanisms work. It seems daunting. There is a lot to it, but you can play it at a level that suits you. You could, for example, just go design a ship and say, okay, let's have an armored cruiser. Let's auto-design that, and boom, I'll just go with that and just be happy. I think it's unlikely. I think most of the people who love this game love to tweak, love to ponder, love to adapt and create a navy that they can be proud of. And that's really what Rule the Waves 3 is all about. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.